All right. Welcome everyone again. Super glad that you're joining us for this special event that we're doing in partnership with CommunityShare. At What School Could Be, we really believe in the power of community to transform learning, and that's exactly the kind of work that CommunityShare puts into practice every single day. They do their work connecting schools with community partners, and that really aligns beautifully with our Mobilizing Your Community theme in the innovation playlist. And that's really all about the things that are possible when there's lots of energy from all the role groups towards a shared vision for learning. So tonight, you're going to hear from Jill from Community Share, as well as several of their incredible educator fellows, Laura, Samantha, David, Shannon, and Shelby. And they've spent the past year leading community engaged learning experiences in partnerships with, of course, their students, but also their local collaborators. So they're going to share out their process, what they learned, and maybe even some of the surprises that came along the way. So we will have time for questions and answers, but feel free to drop them in the chat as we go along, and they'll try to answer them along the way. So I am going to turn it over right now to Jill to share a little bit about Community Share.
Great. Thank you, Mel. I'm going to share my screen for a moment. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. Well, thank you, Mel. You did a great introduction. So now I can move really quickly. I'm Jill McKenzie with Community Share. I'm one of our professional learning designers, and just so thankful to have this opportunity to partner with What School Could Be and share these stories with you all tonight. Our purpose for being here, of course, is to share and celebrate the stories of community engaged learning, which really allows us to discuss with an ever-growing coalition why community engaged learning is so essential now more than ever and how to bring it to life. We are going to start with I'll give a very brief introduction of Community Share in our organization, and then I will turn it directly over to our fellows to share their experiences. So clearly, community engagement is not a new topic in education. I'm sure everyone in this room has planned a field trip or a canned food drive or a guest speaker as part of a project or unit. But I imagine that we are all here because we recognize that the complexity of our time requires us to really reimagine across our education system and specifically think about shifting how educators, learners, and community members come together, learn together, and reshape their own communities. And so Community Share has been exploring this shift for the last 10 years. We are a nonprofit organization that exists solely to connect educators and their learners with community members around areas of interest, passion, expertise, or lived experiences. And we support these groups in co-creating meaningful real-world learning experiences. And it really started when our founder, Josh Schachter, was teaching high school in Tucson, Arizona, and he was engaged in this project around the concept of home, which was a compelling topic given all of the corners of the globe where his students lived before they came to the US. And this project really culminated in some incredible work. The learners were able to not only connect with their community, but produce work that contributed in a meaningful way to the community. In this one project, Josh and his students collaborated with over 100 partners and organizations. These partnerships obviously brought the learning to life, and Josh and several of his fellow teachers were thinking about the fact that often these kinds of connections are very like person specific. One teacher in a school or one staff member has all these connections, and if that person leaves, all of that social capital and those connections go with it. And so he thought about, why isn't there a system for equitable, sustainable relationships between community members, educators, and their students. They started asking, what if we created a human library? Um, Everyone in our communities has interests, passions, experiences, and what sort of learning and relationships might emerge if we created pathways for um, folks to connect around those things every day. And this thinking was compelled further by sort of the emerging research at the time around social capital and how opportunity most often rests at the intersection of not just what we know, but who we know. And studies continue to show over time that social capital is such a critical predictor of all of these things: academic achievement, educational attainment, health, happiness, you name it. And schools often focus on that what you know and not the who you know. And so Josh and a bunch of passionate educators took the next step and they created this platform. Um, Essentially, it is a human library where educators can share the projects that they're working on, and community members create profiles, and not just LinkedIn profiles, but profiles that reveal their interests, passions, and lived experiences, so that we can really connect at meaningful intersection points beyond just what folks do for work. And essentially, the platform has been compared to a Match.com for community engaged learning. Of course, a digital platform is nice, but we know that this is deeply human work. And so, CommunityShare over time has developed support systems for the community engagement aspect of this work, as well as our professional learning offerings that support educators in designing and facilitating community engaged learning experiences. And what started with one school and group in Tucson has now expanded to, we're working with 13 different entities across the country, both districts as well as counties, maker spaces, you name it. Any sort of entity that wants to grow their own human library and learning ecosystem. And, we've had the great pleasure of working with all these groups who are deeply committed to PBL, whether it's project-based learning, problem-based learning, place-based learning, and CommunityShare really comes in with a focus on the community connection, and not just how do we connect educators and community partners, but what does it actually take to co-create with the partners and students these meaningful real-world learning experiences that, of course, elevate learning and contribute to our communities themselves. We've distilled lots of lessons learned over the last decade into a framework that captures kind of the attributes of high quality community engaged learning. And this is not a curriculum, it's not a lesson plan or unit plan. It is literally a framework, a lens through which to look at any unit or project. And like bring it to life in these ways. So we focus on curiosity. How do we reveal the interests and passions of not only our students, but our communities, and find ways for those to drive the learning? Of course, community. How can we enrich the learning experience with not just the knowledge and expertise, but the wisdom and lived experiences of those in our communities to make authentic contribution? And that's incredibly important because, as we know, the opportunity for students to make a difference not only elevates the quality of learning and the student work itself, but it makes school an opportunity to build a better world. So CommunityShare offers 3 different educator fellowships right now. We have 2 thriving local fellowships in Tucson that we'll get to hear from those fellows, where they meet in person all year to really design and implement these sorts of projects. And then we also offer a virtual fellowship That's open to any educator in any of our networks across the country, and it's also open to any educators just interested in engaging with community engaged learning. And so I'm going to pause there and turn it over to them to share their stories and experiences. So I am going to turn it over to Rebecca to introduce her fellows first.
Hello, Rebecca Oravec. I am currently transitioning into special education math after a history of teaching art and then math last year. And I've been with Community Share for 7, 8 years now as a participant. And for the last 4 years, I've been the program director for our Sawadita Community Share fellowship group. And I have two co-facilitators, one of which was able to join me today, Sarah Mora. And so we just, as we've grown, we've found the need to have multiple facilitators to do our best work. And then we're joined tonight by two of our participant teachers. We have Laura Mandel, who is a primary teacher, currently teaching second grade after some fantastic work in kindergarten. And then we also have Samantha Gilbert, who is a high school science teacher. We'll be talking specifically about her biology class. She also last year did environmental sciences. So just wonderful. It was so hard to choose. We have about 20 participants year after year out of our pretty small school district. So I think we'll start with the littles. Let's start with Laura first to hear about her project this year. And Laura, if you want to touch on any of your kindergarten work, you're absolutely welcome to do that as well. But I know that we mostly just talked about this year's project.
All right, can you hear me? Yes, okay, cool, yay. All right, so I am Laura Mandel. I'm a second grade teacher at Sarita Primary School here in Sarita. And my project this year was sparked with, last year we had done a newspaper type project with our classroom. I was not a part of Community Share last year. I was, again, as Rebecca mentioned, the 2 years prior in kindergarten. And I had switched from kindergarten to second grade. So that was my project for the year. So this year I said, okay, I'm ready to go back to Community Share, and started again with the newspaper idea, and thought we could kick it up a notch and make it a magazine project this year, where kids could maybe have more input, could come up with more creative ideas, could have, and we could create a full magazine with the kids' interests and articles that they would write. So that was sort of the spark. My connection was connecting to a local magazine here in our area called The Valley Neighbors and Friends magazine. And it's something that we get here in our neighborhood, and it has a, letter to the participants, to the neighbors, and it includes lots of different articles. And I thought, well, I'll reach out to this lady and find out how, how she could help us create a magazine in our classroom. So I reached out to her via email, and she was excited and suggested we meet for coffee. So we did that. And she really got excited. Not only was she enthusiastic about the idea, but she decided she wanted to feature my class on the cover of the magazine, and then do an article interviewing my husband and myself. But at this coffee, she hooked us up with her content coordinator and the person that put together the articles for the magazine. And then she and Miss Clancy, the publisher, both came to our classroom, talked to our kids, talked about what it took to make a magazine. Miss Moreno came to our classroom a number of times to help the kids write their articles, talk about what it takes to make a magazine, how to do interviews, did like a practice interview with her and her husband one time. And then just sort of let us loose to write our articles. So over a period of weeks, my kids just started writing magazine articles. They talked about what they wanted to do. Oh, there it is. Thank you, Rebecca. The first on the left is the newspaper in that classroom, and how we showed, it was kind of hard, but it was like a big butcher piece of paper that just had lots of articles on it. In the middle, you can see Miss Clancy as she came to our classroom. And then middle is also the picture of our class on the cover of the Valley magazine. And then on the right is one of the covers of the kids magazines. They all got to tell me what they wanted to put on their cover. I went to the internet, popped out 3 of their, they said they wanted to do ninjas or I'm blanking on the character the one kiddo likes, any kind of sports, but I put their photo on there. On the left was the different articles that were in the magazine. And then the bottom right picture is the kids holding up each of their own magazine covers. The inside included all the different articles they wrote. And that turned into let's see, games they played, movies they enjoyed, trips they'd taken, projects they worked on. We did a science project in the classroom and one of the kids wrote about that. We did an interview of our principal and there was an article about that. So, it was just a fun way for the kids to share things that they learned with each other. They all got a copy of the magazine with themselves on the cover. They got their own magazine that they created. And hopefully that'll be a fun memory for them over the years to remember things that they learned and how they were able to share that with their friends and some of the community, and then getting to meet, a magazine. So that was this year. Last year we did, the year before we did creative learners sharing their knowledge with preschoolers. We did a little, actually little oversized book. Pictures and wrote a little bit, and we created this giant book. And then when the preschoolers came to visit to see what kindergarten would be like, we got to share this book with them. And the kids all got up in front and talked to the preschoolers and told them what kindergarten was going to be like. And the year prior, we did I was doing virtual virtual classes at that time, Sarita Digital Pathways. And I connected with an artist in Sedona who's a sculpturist, and he talked to us about how to make sculptures. We watched some of his videos about how he does some of his sculpturing, and then we hooked up with him via Zoom, and the kids had gotten their own clay. I had packed up packages for each child to have their own clay, and they could make their own. He taught us how to make a cat, and then they got to make whatever animal they wanted. So just meeting with the community and all these different efforts has been really awesome for our kids. And it's really, I think, kicked up my teaching and the classroom environment and the fun that they have and the kiddos' engagement. So that's just what I'd like to share about what I think about CommunityShare.
Thank you, Laura. And I want to add that sometimes as a facilitator, I hear things like, yeah, but how are you going to include student voice with, little primary kids? And if you ask them what they're into, and they're into pizza and they're into Sonic. And I think Laura's projects are just such an amazing example of how you can take student voice and interests at any age and bring them into the learning. And so I always appreciate you bring it in and then you send it out in 15 different directions based on how the kids want to go. Amazing. And then next we're going to hear from Samantha Gilbert, again, who teaches high school biology. Sam, did you have slides you want to share? Or do you want me to just share from the end of year? Oh, you're muted.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I actually have slides that I was going to share.
Perfect.
Yeah. All right. I'm Samantha Gilbert. I teach biology, freshman biology, AP biology at Sarita High School. Let's see if I can share this. I haven't done this in a while. Entire screen. Share. And then, okay. All right. So the project that I did this school year is called the Dog DNA Project. hold on, sorry, trying to hit the slideshow here. Here it is. So the spark for this project was I just kind of stumbled across online. I was looking for ideas for possibly for a genetics project, and I stumbled across the fact that so Ancestry.com, they have like their pet DNA kits, and I found out that they actually have a program where they will donate the kits to teachers for free to use in the classroom. So I reached out to them, and I was able to get 6 free dog DNA kits. So I knew I was like, okay, so this is going to be kind of like the jumping off point for some kind of a genetics project. And I did this in just one class, in my honors bio class. So that's kind of what kicked it all off. This was a lot of fun because I put the students into groups, and then they got to choose like a group dog, like one person in their group that had the dog that they wanted to test. So these actually aren't slides that I made. These are slides that students made, where they got to like share with the class and with their group all about their dogs. So we were looking at both physical traits and behavioral traits in the dogs. So this is Stella, who talks a little bit. And of course, the student got to pull up pictures on their phone and kind of tell the group about their dogs. This is Rosalie or Rosie. So the first thing I did with the project, because it was kind of recommended that one thing you could do would be to like have the student identify the like physical traits and the behavioral traits of the dog. And then when we get the DNA results back, you can kind of compare, what the students identified versus what the DNA identified. And then you can kind of look to see like if there's anything that doesn't match up perfectly. And then you can kind of explore like why that might be. So that's what we did. Is I actually made this assignment where students, I called it like a dog metric system, where they had to like identify all these different traits for their group dog and work together, look at pictures. And this was kind of fun because I let them kind of come up with like their own metric system. So each group kind of had something a little different and could kind of like compare, how they went about this task with other groups. So yeah, and then so it was just this table here that they filled out. So then of course I sent the kits home with them. They swabbed the cheek of their dog. We sent in the DNA tests, and we got the results back. And what I had them do with the results was look something like this. So we made some posters of the results. And again, what we were looking for was anything that did not match up with what the students identified as far as like what they saw for the traits or what they believe these behavioral traits are. So the posters actually had them color code. You can kind of see anywhere that something is highlighted in red, it didn't quite match up with what they thought the results would have been in the DNA test. And then anything in green was things that did match up. And you can see they also did like the breeds, the test, of course, identified the breed makeup, which is pretty neat. So here's another example of the results poster. This is Cha-Cha. But yeah, so we're kind of looking at, all right, so what didn't match up and why? So then what we did from there is we went into a pretty common thing that we do in CommunityShare, which is called the QFT, the question formulation technique. So what I had them do, and here's one example of one group's QFT, was come up with questions that they had. So based off the results, what didn't match up, what didn't match up, any questions about dog genetics that they could come up with. So every single group made a poster filled with questions. And this was kind of neat because, I could come back to a lot of these questions later in the genetics unit. There were at least a couple groups that asked about like, oh, like is DNA different for, the biological sexes? And, so then later I go, oh yeah, there's what's called the sex chromosomes, so I always like doing these QFTs because then I can come back to these questions, throughout a whole unit and kind of point out, you guys asked about this and, this is how this ties in. So this is one example of a QFT poster. I did have each group kind of come up with their top 3 questions. So that would be here. So I had them put them on sticky notes and at the end of that period, bring them up to kind of create our class poster. So from there, I decided the direction that the project was going to go. And I thought that there was a lot of interesting questions that kind of got at the whole like nature versus nurture argument. I know there was you can see number 20 there in purple. There was at least a couple groups that were kind of like, wait a second, like does DNA determine our intelligence and how smart we can be? Or, like how does DNA determine like a personality trait? And so after kind of seeing like, multiple questions that got all that were kind of like addressing that, I thought that that would be a really cool way for like our project to go, was to create a nature versus nurture argument. And then I could kind of like teach the genetics side of it, protein synthesis, heredity, and so they could learn about that side, but then of course also learn about how, a dog's environment and upbringing also play a role, especially like in these behavioral traits that were tested for. So that led into, so at about this point, I still didn't have like a really solid like CommunityShare partner. I had reached out to some people on the platform and like hadn't really heard back. So I was like, okay, I'm going to kind of put myself out there and go searching a little bit. And it kind of dawned on me that what could be like a really, really good partner for this project would be, they didn't necessarily have to be a genetics expert. They could know a lot about dogs. So what I did was I reached out to like local dog trainers, and I literally just looked online and like, wrote some like Facebook messages and like emails and just a quick little message like, hey, I'm doing this project in my biology class, and we're going to look at, nature versus nurture with dogs. And I'm looking for someone who really understands, how a dog's upbringing and training impacts different behaviors. And luckily I had one person that replied back and was super interested, just a local trainer, trained at the PetSmart here in town, and had a little like his own business as well. He's like, yeah, that sounds really neat. I'd love to be a part of that. So that worked out so nice. So, and you can kind of see him in the picture. He's kind of stooped down. Oh, and he actually had a service dog named Ellie, which is really cool. So he got to like bring his dog in and everything. So he came in a couple times. And yeah, he was our nurture expert. So he taught us everything he knew about how the dog's upbringing and environment and experiences and training played a role in these different behavioral traits. So different groups got to choose different dog behavioral traits that they wanted to focus on for the project and research. So, and the way that I kind of set up, like designed the interaction when he came in is I knew, a whole class might be a little bit intimidating. So I would have students get in their groups at those lab stations. You can kind of see him in the back of the picture. And I'd have him rotate. So all the other students would be working on something, and I'd go work with the other students. And then when he came around to each individual group, they could ask him all the questions they had about their particular trait. What has he seen? What has he experienced? His knowledge, and they took all the notes. So that's how I kind of designed that. So then it was just like little groups of 4, which I feel like, for someone who doesn't normally work for high schoolers is a little bit more manageable. And that worked out really good. The kids really liked them, and he had lots of good, had knowledge and information to share with them. What I really wanted to do, it didn't quite work out, was I was going to have them kind of become the nature experts and kind of teach him, his name is Mr. Joe, what they learned. But he ended up moving like about halfway through the project and wasn't able to come in a bunch. So students did make final presentations that I emailed to him. But in a perfect world, what I would have done was, because he was kind of like, oh yeah, I don't remember a ton from when I took high school biology. So I was going to have them kind of give him a refresher and then do the nature side research and then share what they learned as far as like how does DNA actually play a role, in these different behavioral traits. Like I said, so I didn't quite get all of that I was hoping for, but it still worked out really well. So then of course there was the nature side of it. I had a couple, like, I guess semi, not like full-blown community partners, but I had a contact at ancestry.com who helped me get the kits. So when we were having a little bit of trouble researching like the specific, so it said what specific gene was tested for these different behavioral traits, but sometimes it would be a little hard to find because I was trying to connect it to the protein synthesis aspect. So exactly what protein was made by that gene and how does that protein play a role in, a behavioral trait. So I was able to kind of reach out to him, and he kind of gave me a resource. And then I actually did have a video chat with like a professor from the U of A who actually is in the process of like trying to come up with a universal naming system for different genes. And she kind of was able to give me a bunch of cool resources of places to go to like research genes and like what their name is and like what they do code for and how they work. So that was kind of cool too on that side of it. Okay, so that was kind of our connections with our community partner, Mr. Joe. And then as far as impact, it kind of worked out perfectly because then, around this point of the project, I actually was kind of trying to decide what I wanted to do with the like the budget, the grant, because I had gotten the kits for free. So we really hadn't spent much money. You know, Mr. Joe, I offered, you know, if you know, he wanted somebody to come in from CommunityShare and he just wanted to, you know, volunteer his time. But it kind of worked out perfect that there was a teacher at my school. She does like NHS, and she was actually doing like a dog supply drive for our local like shelter. And so I thought of this idea of like, well, what if they take my students take what they learned as far as you know, the nurture side of it, and you know, pick out some dog supplies that could help with, you know, I don't know, you know, fear of loud noises or you know, social anxiety. And so yeah, that's what we did, is we kind of researched that and basically just went shopping and got a bunch of donations for our dog shelter, and we're able to like take it to that teacher. That ended up being kind of cool to like give back to the community as well with the project, and that kind of just like fell into place as well. It was like a really great part of the project. Yeah, so that's kind of what's off to the right of the screen is like yeah, you can see this picture over here where they're like holding up some of the donations that we got that they took to the NHS teacher. Let's see what else. Yeah, so that's kind of, oh, and how it kind of culminated was like each group did do a presentation on like what was their trait and what did they learn from Mr. Joe as far as like the nurture side, and then what did they learn from their research, and like they had to tie in what they learned in class from protein synthesis and genetics, and what they learned about these genes. So it kind of like pulled it all together, and they actually had to like put a number to it. So that was kind of their challenge, was like, you know, as far as how much is actually nature, how much is nurture, you know, anywhere from 0 to 100 for each one. And I don't know, as a teacher, it's one of those questions that I just love, because it's like, there is no one correct answer, you know, like, but it's just this really interesting debate. We know it's definitely both, how much of each, but yeah, they kind of had to commit to like coming up with that final answer as a group. And this is all the evidence, you know, that they had for it, you know, from both the community partner, from the research, from what they learned in class. So yeah, I love questions like that, that just, there's not that one right answer, you know, and you really got to support it with evidence and what you learned. But yeah, so that was my project this year, the dog DNA project. Let's see, what else? Yeah, definitely trying to incorporate that student voice. I mean, I think it was just so fun from the start that they got to like share about their dogs and, you know, share that part of their lives with each other. And then definitely the QFT and like kind of posing their own questions that kind of drove, you know, the direction of the project. And advice to any other educators that are considering trying to do projects like this, I would say it's definitely worth it. You know, don't be intimidated. I tend to kind of be an introvert, so stuff like that kind of like intimidates me a little bit. But you definitely won't regret it. It's definitely worth it. You know, put yourself out there. Don't be scared to like invite someone into your classroom. Like it'll work out just fine. And I think it just definitely pays off. It you know, students just love it, and they're more engaged and learn more. And then I feel better as a teacher. Yeah, it just makes me feel happy about teaching as well. So yeah, that was my dog DNA project.
Thank you, Sam. Amazing. And I love that just with the two of you presenting, it kind of shows a full spectrum of some of our earliest students who are, you know, our advanced group students.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much. We're gonna turn now to one of our fellows from the virtual sort of national group, and then we'll close out the evening with our Sunnyside fellows. So I'm gonna introduce Shelby Cochran, and she is from Maricopa County in Arizona, and she is teaches K to 5 gifted, and she's going to share a bit with us. I'm not going to spill any of the beans. I'm just going to let you take it over, Shelby. Go for it.
Thank you, Samantha. That was awesome. Thanks for sharing. Could you also stop sharing your screen so I could share mine?
At the very top of your screen, there might be like a little red button that says stop sharing.
You might have to hover over the top and it'll pop
There
up.
we go.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, let me get mine pulled up. Okay, so I am Shelby Cochran. I am a gifted teacher at Maricopa Elementary School here in Maricopa County in the Maricopa Unified School District. And I was in the fall 2024 cohort. I first heard about CommunityShare from a teacher spotlight speaker at a teacher leadership institute last summer, which is held in Tucson. And she just briefly mentioned it, but it was something that really sparked my interest. So as soon as I got back to my hotel room, I was able to reach out to Josh, the founder, and we set up a meeting to learn more. And by the fall, I was part of the fellowship. I started out by asking my scholars. So I worked with my fourth grade group on this. But I first just started asking my scholars, what is the most special place in Maricopa to you and why? So we have Wingstop, KFC, school, grandma's house. I not only asked my fourth grade group that, I asked all of my scholars that I pull out and see. I asked my whole school. I sent out a school-wide email. I asked our school board members, I asked community leaders, I asked, including the mayor, just to kind of see what the feedback was. And that was really a really cool thing to get to see why Maricopa is so special to all of us. So I ended up knowing that we were going to do a project based on entrepreneurship. So I reached out to a local coffee shop and just asked to speak to the owner. And she ended up giving me a call back and we set up a time to meet at her coffee shop. I came with my lesson plan in hand, asking for her expertise. And then I asked what she needed at her coffee shop. And then together we brainstormed how this partnership could impact the community together. We did this in the fall. And so we were wrapping up at the end of that second quarter, so around Christmas time. And she was having community events some of the weekends where she was inviting Mr. and Mrs. Claus to her coffee shop for free pictures for the community. She invited our local high school band to come and get some exposure and practice playing in front of people. So she had originally invited my fourth grade group to come and sell hot chocolate at these community events. I kind of have one of those experiences where that didn't necessarily work out, but you'll get to see at the end what our community impact was anyways. But she said that she'd love to help, but she didn't have much time to come to the school. And she said that she wasn't sure about her ability to make a kid-friendly presentation. So I thought that was kind of a beautiful juxtaposition where she had the knowledge of running a business and I could put that knowledge into a lesson. So my scholars agency, they brainstormed questions that they wanted to ask her about running a business. And I actually looked up questions or kind of had some in my back pocket that I never even ended up having to bring out to get the ball rolling. We took the whole hour brainstorming questions, having conversations. Some of the kids had their own expertise. So there was a really beautiful conversation that was sparked among this. And then I emailed all of these questions to Miss Santiago, the owner of the coffee shop. While we waited, we did research on the history of hot cocoa. And then this is what Miss Santiago ended up emailing me back. She wrote down all of the scholars' questions along with her answers to them. And I put them into a beautiful Canva presentation. So every single day we looked at one or two slides and then did an activity to go with it. So honestly, I didn't do much. The questions at the top are from the students, and then the answers at the bottom are from Mrs. Santiago. All I did was type them into a Canva presentation. So my scholars ended up creating a theme and a name for their coffee shop. Everything that's underlined are words that I thought maybe my scholars wouldn't understand. And so I kind of had like a little cheat sheet of like vocabulary words that I passed out to everybody. So it was right there in front of us that we could stop and talk about them throughout the presentations on the days that they came up. Some more information. We started talking about hiring staff and how do you pay your staff. And then we did a math lesson that had some limitations about how to schedule people and how to budget for your staff. we talked about flavors, and then they got to create their own menu. They had to have a specialty drink that went along with the theme of their cafe. And then also they could have just anything else on their menu that they wanted. So here's some examples of that. We talked about profit margins. So I led an activity one day where we talked about how much it was going to cost our shops to create a basic cup of hot cocoa, and we brainstormed how much we think that we should sell it for and looked at market prices and competitors in the city. Some more questions about insurance and repairs, and then we talked about marketing, the use of social media, and then she also said that word of mouth is always best. So we created Instagram posts for our specialty drinks for our marketing practice. And then we kind of left off on what is our next step if we were to do this in the future. And she said that you either major in business and financing, or you just step in and get into the industry and work your way up. So after we were done with all of our lessons, we created miniature cocoa shops. So here's my scholars measuring, taping, gluing, getting creative. Some more pictures. And then here's the final projects. So all of their evidence that they had, we called their business proposals, and they were all in these folders. And then their cute little hot chocolate stands right next to it. And throughout the whole project, this took months, I was sending all of these pictures to Miss Santiago just so that she could stay in the loop. And we continued to keep growing that conversation around this and just growing that relationship and that partnership. So here's some more examples. And then, like I said, our big community project ended up falling through, but we were able to invite members of the school and Miss Santiago to come to our classroom and look at our business proposals and our hot cocoa. We had a hot chocolate party, so we all drank hot chocolate, and it was a good time just getting to connect and celebrate our successes. So some of my scholar outcomes were here at the bottom in bold. And I'd like to point out the second one down in bold. One of my little girls said, you should always have a good mouth. A good mouth means people will like your shop more, and they will tell everybody about your shop, so they will want to come. And then the one below that, if you're ever trying to open a business and you're broke, it'll be hard. So lots of cute responses back, I think, from outcomes. And then outcomes personally for me as a teacher, the biggest thing I think is I had done project-based communities before, and it had always been kind of one-sided where I invite people into my classroom for their expertise. We take it, and that's kind of the end of it. Whereas through CommunityShare, that's not really the paradigm. The paradigm is, okay, they can help us, but how do we help the shop? And then altogether, how does that partnership help the community as a whole? Kind of like Samantha said, I gained confidence in reaching out to local business owners and community leaders. I was terrified to do that, but we learned some tips and tricks through the fellowship, and that made me very much more confident in doing that. And then working with people outside of school, things fall through. And so, you learn from it and you move on and you hope for better next school year. So if I could put it all in one sentence, my teaching practice changed because of how I approach projects and their possibilities, having scholars reflect frequently throughout their project and with evidence, and not hesitating to actively bridge my scholars in my community.
Thank you so much, Shelby.
Thank you.
I'm going to move quickly to make sure we get our Sunnyside folks here. So I'm going to turn it over to Jackie, and if Priscilla's here, yes, there's Priscilla, to introduce your fellows.
Great. Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Jackie Nichols. I'm one of the two co-facilitators with the Sunnyside CommunityShare Fellowship. We are entering our 5th year in the fellowship this year, and we've had more than 70 educators involved since our first year, and 100 plus partners. We also, one aspect of our program is we have near peer mentors. We have a cadre of high school mentors that have been in place here for 3 years with us. This year, they branched out and worked with 8 different schools. from elementary to high school, worked with middle school as well as near peer mentors. You're going to hear tonight, Priscilla will introduce our fellows, but you're going to hear from both fellows that have been with us for a year or two, and then a brand new fellow. So you're going to see that kind of scope of experience. And we'll hang out afterwards if you have questions about any aspect of our program. Priscilla, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, I'm Priscilla Schweitzer. I'm the co-facilitator with Jackie Nichols and Sunnyside Community Share. I've been with Community Share for many years as a teacher volunteer, to a parent volunteer, to a fellow myself, and this is my second year as a co-facilitator. I'd also like to mention we're really excited because this past year we went from 10 to representing 16 of 21 campuses at all 4 levels of pre-K, elementary, middle school, and high school. So that was really exciting for us. So we actually have representation from one of our high schools, one of our middle schools, and one of our elementaries. So I will begin with Shannon. She's a high school teacher. I'll let her introduce herself and her grade level. And then after Shannon, we can go with David from the middle school. And then if time permits, Jill, you can let us know. We also have Nova here, who's been with us for some years, if there's time for her to also share. If you guys want to present your screens too, you guys can share the slide I know you might have presented. And then we can just be mindful of sticking to our time frame. Thank you all for being here tonight.
All right. Hello. I'm gonna share my screen. I hope. All right, let's see. Perfect. All right, can everyone see that? Awesome. All right. Oh gosh, that's not what I meant. I meant slideshow. Okay, so hello. I am Shannon Foytik. I teach 12th grade at Sunnyside High School. I teach the dual enrollment English class. So I teach the kids who are trying to get a little bit of college credit before they leave high school. And this was my first year with CommunityShare as a fellow. I found out about it I feel like it was almost on accident a little bit. It was like an email that came through right before I started the year, because this was my first year at Sunnyside High School as well, just asking who was interested. I read about it, and I did a study on community connected learning a few years ago when I did my master's, and it seemed kind of right up my alley and stuff that I was already very passionate about. So I jumped right in, and I'm so happy that I did, because it's been amazing. And so for my project, what I did is I had the 12th grade students. I had 107 Pima writing students, and I wanted to give them opportunities to explore parts of their communities that they already felt a connection to, but also parts of their communities that they felt weren't being discussed enough. So part of our local history, or even like their cultural history, that wasn't being given the spotlight that the students thought it needed. And to be honest, that's kind of the only direction that I gave them. From there, they were able to go whatever direction they went. And since there was 107 of them, I got 107 different directions. So super quickly, I won't spend 100 years talking about all of this, just a better overview. It started out with students having to explore, so having to figure out what was the direction that they wanted to go. That was the first step, was 1, figuring out what that was, and 2, identifying sources that went with it. Since this was a college level, or was meant to be closer to college level course, we had to, the expectations were quite high for the students. But incorporating
the parts of the community that they were naturally interested in addition to the parts that they got to explore a little bit more and figure out and learn more about that they didn't already understand. It's the kids definitely took it and ran. Like, it wasn't something that they had to kind of set their minds to doing. They were more ready to do it because it was something that they felt like they genuinely wanted to do. So they had to figure out whatever sources they were going to use for their topic and evaluate those historical narratives. Or for some kids, it was more current events based, but still it had some kind of rooted historical significance. So that was the first step. The second step was working with writing conventions and just what goes into writing an extensive research paper. All of these papers ended up being at least 10 pages long. So the kids had a lot that they had to say and that they were ready to talk about. And then the third step, the most significant, was kind of that contextualization in addition to wrapping up their digital research with those in-person experiences. And that's where those 7 field trips that we planned came into play. From all of what the students chose. So there, like I said, there was 107 of them, but I wanted all of them to be able to go do something out in the community that they felt connected to whatever topic that they chose. Obviously, we couldn't do 107 field trips because they all had different things. So I kind of separated them into categories of, like, generally what did they pick and what was something in our community that would relate to that would supplement that information, but would also give them an opportunity to, like I said before, be fully immersed in it and talk to people who are experts in that field. So we had 7 different categories it ended up being. We had historic towns, we had ghost towns, we had mining history, we had general Arizona history, we had indigenous population studies. We had a pretty significant group of kids who all picked the Barrio Viejo neighborhood in Tucson, which, for those of you who aren't in Tucson, is a very culturally significant neighborhood that has a pretty extensive history of gentrification and lots of other things that went into that. And so telling the story of that neighborhood was important to a lot of students. And then the last category was like the current events kind of kids. So these are all the different field trips that we went on. Students went to Tombstone. They interviewed a historian there. They went to the Superstition Mountain Mine Museum up near Phoenix. They interviewed a couple of historians there. We went to the Arizona Natural History Museum in Tucson, which was actually really incredible because the students got to go to a historic archive where they had actual historic documents that the students could schedule to look at, which, believe it or not, was super interesting for them. We went to Tubac, which is one of the first established towns that still exists in southern Arizona. Arizona History Museum, which has a pretty extensive indigenous studies area. We went on a Barrio Viejo walking tour, which was actually conducted by a man whose grandfather was born in the Barrio Viejo neighborhood, and he grew up in that neighborhood before a lot of the gentrification took place. And so that was really incredible to connect with him. And then the last one was a roundtable discussion with the vice mayor of Tucson. So kids that did current events could ask questions about these things and ask questions about what's going to happen or what's not going to happen or what should happen and all those different aspects of it. And all of that could get roped into their papers. And last thing that they did through CommunityShare was a partner who worked with them on the art of storytelling, because obviously we had all these research components and all these different pieces that needed to be in it technically as a research paper. The idea of incorporating their voice and their passion and their call to action in the community to say, this is something that I think you all need to know about. Here's why, and here's what we need to do with it. So we had a CommunityShare partner who came into the classroom and did, it was like a large discussion with all the students where they bounced ideas off of her and then she asked questions of them, and it got their minds thinking a little bit more on how do we get these stories out there where they're easily disseminated against like larger groups so that more people can know about the things that you think are important in our communities. And I think that was my last slide, but that was my Spark Notes version. It was a really big project, so that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. Much
Okay,
appreciated.
I'm gonna jump.
Jill, did you want us to still have David present?
Priscilla, I'm going to jump in really quick over here and
Okay.
just acknowledge that we are at the top of the hour. So for those of you who need to head on out, I totally understand, but we are interested in hearing David share at least a little bit of his project. They've been terrific. So if you need to go, thank you so much for being here. If you want to stay, can hang out a little bit, please do so, and we'll hold the meeting open for a little bit more.
David, you might want to also unmute so that if you play your video, we can hear your audio with it.
Yeah, I was looking for the unmute button. So, all right. Does everybody still see my screen? Okay. Yeah. All right. Cool. Hello, everybody. I'm David Contreras. I'm a teacher at Challenger Middle School, part of the Sunnyside School District. I teach 7th, 8th grade general art and honors art. And I have my slideshow here, so I'm gonna go back to that screen. And these are kind of just some artifacts. On the left, you see kind of my whole project layout. This was presented at our big celebration where I kind of break down the project. And then on the right, I have what was generated towards the end of the project. And this was something kind of after I was done with everything. I created an art show for my students. So I'll kind of share a little bit about how this project kind of inspired more of those things. But really quick, the project was called Loteria Muralism. It was 150 students participated in grades 7th and 8th grade. Again, it was a Challenger Middle School. It included me, one community partner. She goes by Arte Rosas as her Instagram handle. So that's kind of how she introduced herself to the kids. And then I also had one high school mentor, I think Sebastian, who helped me out a little bit too. The main driving question is there, but it's also shared in the video. So I'm actually going to go to the next slide and kind of go over the video, which I feel really represents the whole project. So let me know if the volume is okay. For my community share project, we focused on making Loteria card paintings. I invited local artists and muralists, Arte Rosas, to my classroom to partner on this project. She did a presentation, a demonstration, and then had students sketch, transfer, and paint their Loteria cards using acrylic paints in about 3 weeks. We focused on challenging students to think about where am I headed and what part do I play in my community. To help students create a sketch, we prompted them to think about culture or community involvement, hobbies or interests, and future jobs or dreams that they had for themselves to create a unique Loteria card. I feel the project enriched many students' learning experiences through hands-on work using acrylic paints, color mixing, problem solving, and working with an artist in their community. Many students at this point had not used acrylic paints, so for many, learning to start a painting from an idea they had was very new to them. Many even chose to redo their paintings again to make something better from previous failures and found success in their new paintings. It was really cool to see the kids interact with an artist from the community, but also engage with creating this content that you're seeing now. I gave full range to my students to use my GoPro to walk around the classroom and really document the experience from their own perspective. I shared some audio from our visiting artist on her experience with working with the students.
It was awesome, first of all. I thought it was really cool to witness the artistic process from all the students. I was surprised to learn that the artistic process for the students was very similar to mine. There was a lot of trial and error, a lot of sketching, And it was really cool to see their rough drafts be really different from their final drafts. I loved that. It was really gratifying seeing the inspiration and the creativity come to them. Yeah, I think a lot of the students really surprised themselves too with what they could do. Well, this is my first time using CommunityShare, and so far so good. I mean, I learned that it was a really good place for opportunities like this. So I'm interested in exploring the website more and participating in projects similar to this one and networking, meeting new people, all that.
All right. Let me get to the next slide here. Yeah, so just kind of, overall that was all the video, that was all the final. And a lot of it just kind of started here. So it's kind of cool to see, kudos to all you other educators, because it was cool seeing your process as well, and then, being able to share mine. But we kind of started with these painting maps, and that's kind of where we generated ideas with the kids. And then me and Arte Rosas, we sat down and really broke it down on the right side as, how can we do this in a big project? We had both talked about painting murals, and we were kind of overwhelmed with the fact that I would have 6 classes participating in that project. And painting murals with middle schoolers is sometimes difficult. So we kind of scratched that, and we were able to, with funds, be able to provide more things for the kids, like easels and things like that, and buy everybody a canvas. So prior to that, a little bit of background knowledge was done with the kids beforehand. So I did a lot of background work to, get the kids some color theory, which you can see in the bottom of the center of the screen. And then she actually came in a handful of days and did kind of like workshops where she actually taught the kids how to transfer their canvases, which you can see at the top center. And then on the right was kind of like the final product was kind of what we both had talked about, that we wanted to make sure that we were involved in the project with alongside the kids, and not just, like, let's just paint these loteria cards and that's it. We really wanted to try to go into the project really deep with them too. And then these are just some steals that I got from the videos. Just, kids working in progress. This project is my second time with CommunityShare, so I'm a 2-year fellow. And so last year I recorded a lot of video with kids' faces, and it was a little bit harder to share that content. So this year I really focused on showing the kids how to shoot the camera a little bit down lower to avoid having to edit too much of those stuff here. And then a couple weeks after the semester ended, or right before the semester ended, I decided to throw the kids an art show, because our original plan to hang these in the library just wasn't the sufficient space for the project. And I really felt like the kids needed to have their artwork displayed more professionally. And, me being an artist in the community, I have a studio space downtown in Tucson. So I offered up our space. I talked to some of the other members in the space, and I hung up a show for them. And it went really well. I didn't get a lot of documentation from it, but, it was really awesome to see. Ended up being 160 loteria cards that got painted by all my students. Just there in the top left, you can see one student didn't want to paint, but they did a drawing, and I framed it for them. So, and then this is just kind of what I think was really cool after product. I photographed all the canvases hung up on the wall. Didn't really worry about all the little imperfections where some of them were kind of crooked or not exactly straight, but it created these really cool visuals where now they have like a loteria card. So that's only kind of like, as a lot of people are sharing, like, where do you go after this? And I feel it's inspired me to make this an even bigger thing. Loteria cards originally in my class, it started as a project to do competitions, and visiting artists was a product of COVID teaching time, where I was really trying to get my students engaged. And now through CommunityShare, I'm able to kind of blend these two together. And I was able to create kind of this project. We didn't do a competition out of this one, but it's definitely given me some ideas to maybe continue this project in some way or another. And I'm definitely open to questions. If anybody has any questions they want to say out loud while I go through these last couple slides. But this was actually pretty cool. I got this picture from one of the high school teachers a couple weeks back, and students are already taking that inspiration from my project and taking it to high school. So these were some examples that they sent me pictures of, saying that they were seeing the kids kind of sharing that same inspiration from the Loteria card project in high school already during the summer. Yeah, that's pretty much. I guess another fun fact is that Arte Rosas was also a student at Challenger Middle School 14 years ago. So she took classes in that same classroom, and I connected an artist from our community back to the same classroom she learned in. So that's always been like a really big thing for me, is to find those people, and me being an artist and community person, that's kind of where I feel like I've been trying to really influence and bring people into the program as well. Um, yeah. So if there's any questions, that's all I got. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Can we just give, you can unmute yourselves, give that round of applause out loud for all our community share fellows. Those are some really projects. Super grateful that you folks shared them with us. If this sparked anything in anybody tonight and you want to know more about Community Share, I dropped a 2-pager a little bit earlier in the chat. I'll make sure to drop it again. Jill, if you have a link for people to find out more, can you put that in the chat too? Yeah.
Let's see, what's the best link, Melinda? To, should just put the website.
I think the website to learn more, and then if you have questions, maybe connect@communityshare.org is a great place to just ask questions for more information about our professional development offerings, about community share, bringing community share to your community, or just getting more updates from us and hearing the kinds of stories that all of the fellows told today.
Awesome. So I'm seeing a link in the chat now, along with connect@communityshare.org. So that's an email address. And Sarah's also saying to follow their social media, which obviously from all the great visuals and things that we've seen here tonight, please do that as well. So thank you everyone for attending and sharing this time with us and with our friends at Community Share. Hope you have a great evening, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.